The hardest thing for a coach is trying to prioritize how much time you put in one area or another, while understanding that your cadence of playing games in an Olympic year is about 3.8 games a week.
Welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses, and each week I talk with Olympians, pro athletes, TV stars, Grammy winners, best-selling authors, CEOs, and other high performers to uncover their success secrets. Every conversation is jam-packed with inspiration and actionable ideas we all can apply to our own lives, personally and professionally. Get ready for a behind-the-scenes look at the techniques, processes, and mindsets powering the world's most successful people. Let's go. Hi, friends, and welcome to Season 10 of Everybody Pulls the Tarp. Before we get into this week's episode, I want to make sure that you continue to hear all of the inspiration and powerful ideas we uncover every week on this podcast. So, please go ahead and make sure you are following Everybody Pulls the Tarp in your favorite podcast app. And if you're not, please click that follow button, because when you follow the show, you receive new episodes as soon as they launch, and it will help more people all over the world discover Everybody Pulls the Tarp each and every week. Thank you for all of your support. I am so grateful that we're on this journey together. Now, let's get to this week's episode. This week, my guest is 2023 WNBA Coach of the Year, Stephanie White. Stephanie is the head coach of the WNBA's Connecticut Sun. In 2023, her first season with the Sun, she led the team to the WNBA semifinals and set a new franchise record for wins in a single season. Before joining the Sun, Stephanie served as the head women's basketball coach at Vanderbilt University. And prior to that, she was the head coach of the WNBA's Indiana Fever. She currently serves as a college basketball analyst for ESPN and Big Ten Network, and has covered the NBA's Indiana Pacers for Fox Sports Indiana. But long before her success as a coach and broadcaster, Stephanie had a remarkable career on the court as a player. In college, she led Purdue University to the 1999 NCAA National Championship and was named National Player of the Year. She was selected 21st overall in the WNBA draft and played in the WNBA for 5 seasons. Today, Stephanie is in her second season leading the Connecticut Sun, and she has her team off to a remarkable start this year. Stephanie and I recorded the conversation you are about to hear back in late May, shortly after the start of the 2024 WNBA season. We explored her career as a player, coach, and broadcaster, and Stephanie shared so many powerful career and life lessons that apply far beyond sports. I can't wait for you to hear our conversation. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to 2023 WNBA Coach of the Year, Stephanie White. Last season, in your first year in Connecticut as a head coach, you led the Sun to a 27-13 record. It was a new franchise record for victories in a single season, led the team to the WNBA semifinals. And this year, you're off to a fast start. Here in late May, we're recording this, you're already off to a 3-0 start in the 2024 season. But if you think about the beginning of the 2023 season, early on, I know you prioritized meeting with players, building relationships. What else went into getting off to a fast start and taking over a new franchise as head coach?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, anytime there's new energy, there's a new vibe, there's new perspective, it certainly lends to a high energy level. Certainly it lends to success. And in my time covering sport, I remember talking to a guy who was the coach at Michigan at the time. And I talked to him about the same thing, like, oh my gosh, like a really great start. You had a great first year. What do you expect in year 2? And he said this to me. He said, usually year 1, you kind of overachieve because everything's new. Everybody's really excited. Year 2, sometimes you underachieve, right? Expectations are different. Sometimes you underachieve. And in year 3, you kind of figure out what you're going to be. And so I just think it was us really studying our team, finding ways to put our team in positions to be successful on both ends of the floor, using the versatility of the roster in a different way, offensively and defensively, than they had been used before. But more than anything, when you have great players, you have a lot of new energy, you have a lot of excitement around the potential of a team. they just all rose to the challenge, and it was a really fun time.
Coach, I'm curious, what is your process when you take over in a new role, when you inherit a new team? You mentioned there getting to know the players, getting to know the personnel that you have. What specifically are you looking for in terms of things on and off the floor?
Tendencies, really understanding players' tendencies on the floor, watching what do they do naturally, what are they gifted at, how can we put them in more of those positions. Certainly off the floor, it's just getting to know them, like what's important to them, how can we help them be the best that they can be holistically, not just as a basketball player, but as a leader, as a human being. Can we connect on that level? And when you have an opportunity to get to know them, and they're pros, so as much of a relationship as they want, certainly, but at the same time, building trust and earning trust and communicating transparently, communicating often, and not just communicating to players, but hearing their communication to you and implementing some of the thoughts and suggestions that they have as well. I think that they help us become better coaches just as much as we hopefully help them become better players.
I have interviewed nearly 200 Olympians and pro athletes and TV stars and Grammy winners and entrepreneurs and best-selling authors. And I've had so many conversations with elite coaches, both at the professional and collegiate level. And I think one of my biggest takeaways from the conversation with coaches is how little it actually has to do with X's and O's. There's obviously a lot that goes into the game planning and the technical side of whatever sport someone's leading or coaching. But I'm always drawn to these things outside the X's and O's and the communication. Your players, people around you talk about you being a tremendous communicator, someone who's able to effectively articulate exactly what you're looking for. Talk to me about your communication style. How do you build connection and rapport with people? How do you make sure you're communicating a clear message that people can act on?
I think the biggest thing is I'm transparent. I was a player. All I ever wanted really from my coaches was transparency, whether that's in expectation, whether that's in execution, all of the things. So I'm really transparent. I don't really talk around the issues. I hope that I'm efficient, especially in game and timeouts and clear. I mean, being efficient, being clear. I'm also accountable. So if we do something and communicate something and it doesn't work, then that's on us and we make changes and we own it. I think more than anything, my experiences as a player help me understand how to navigate the different nuances that come with playing in this league. And sometimes that's things like delayed charter flights or delayed commercial flights and getting in at late at night and understanding that we have to make adjustments and changes and thanking our team for their patience and understanding what they're going through to, hey, I know you want to be on the floor more. This is what we need from you. To, hey, this is a great shot when this happens. It's not a great shot when that happens. Just being very clear, being very efficient, and more than anything, leaning on my experience as a player and my staff's experience as players. Two of my assistant coaches played for me. Now, my other assistant coach, his wife played for me. He was a practice player on those teams when we were at the Indiana Fever. So we all see the things similarly. We all communicate similarly, and we've all had experience in this league, and I think that helps.
I'm sure it does. Very, very well said, Coach. Now, I'm curious, when you think about the idea of adapting messages for different situations, what about adapting messages for individuals? So 2023 Naismith National Collegiate Men's Coach of the Year, Jerome Tang, told me, he said, Andrew, the standard never changes, but how you communicate in his mind changes from player to player. And he believes that communication needs to be tailored on an individual basis. What's Stephanie White's view on that? Communication tailored to individuals? If so, how do you do it?
Yeah, I think it's all that way. You certainly learn by building relationship and building rapport and reading body language just as much as seeing results of different ways that you can coach different players. There are some players that you can be a little bit harder on. You can be a little bit more harsh in your communication, a little bit more direct. There are others where you have to try to build up their confidence at times through your communication. So how you're holding them accountable, yet finding ways to allow them to be their best is important. And I think you learn that through building rapport and building relationship. There's also a level of emotion that comes in game. And so I think being able to give grace, receive grace in certain situations where whether we communicate and we're not our best selves and we're communicating in that moment, or players react in a certain way because of emotion in a game, being able to read that, handle that, But more than anything, it's just trying to find different ways. And it's tough, in our league in particular, when we've got a lot of new players and we have 2 to 3 weeks that we're still trying to work through how best to communicate with some of those players. But it's a continual growth process and making sure that it's a priority from a coaching perspective to continue to learn the best ways to allow your players and communicate with your players to be the best that they can be.
Coach, one of the things that I've been particularly fascinated by and struck by in particular this season, obviously the WNBA in many ways is getting more attention and eyeballs than ever before. I have always been a huge fan of the WNBA, of women's sports in general, but everybody's paying a lot more attention, it seems, these days. And one of the things that just struck me is I never really understood how quickly the turnaround is between the start of the WNBA season and the end of the college season. And I'm curious, how do you help players through that? And how do you help yourself as a leader through that when it's a very short time frame to have a group gel, get to know individuals? Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, just in terms of helping players through that, it's tough. I mean, they start their college season. Well, they really don't stop their college seasons, right? I mean, they go from the summertime into preseason, into season and postseason. And the longer you play, the less time that you have off. So it's really tough. I think being mindful of not just the physical impact of that on your rookies, but the mental impact of that and emotional impact of that on your rookies. And then they're coming in and everything changes and players are bigger and faster and stronger and you're playing a higher frequency of games. It's not just 2 games a week now. It's more like it is when in their November and December season, 3 to 4 games a week. Plus, prior to our charter travel announcement, commercial flights, helping them understand recovery. Practices are a little bit different, so you're not going as long, maybe a little bit more intense in the periods of time that you're on the floor, and really helping them understand the nuances of being your best. And that's nutrition, that's rest recovery, that's sleep, that's all of those things that are oftentimes maybe talked about as a priority in college, but you have class and you have social engagements, you have all those things that come with college. Now it's your job. And so to be able to position yourself and being mindful of that in terms of our practice reps and things, in terms of putting a team together, that is one of the single toughest things about the WNBA. This is the first year in the 20 plus years I've been a part of this league as a player, assistant coach, and head coach that we have ever had all of our team, our entire roster in training camp. The first year. So we had everybody for 2 weeks of training camp before we started our season. And so that in itself, I felt like as a veteran team gave us a head start. We're reintroducing some things. We're adding on some things. We're plugging pieces and plugging holes, as opposed to some of these teams who are in a rebuilding process and you're building chemistry. You're learning to understand roles. You're putting in your new offenses and defense based on a lot of new personnel. So it takes time. The hardest thing for a coach is trying to prioritize how much time you put in one area or another, while understanding that your cadence of playing games in an Olympic year is about 3.8 games a week. So making sure you're not going too long, you're efficient in what you do. Everything you do has to be a combo drill, has to be combo in terms of priority of execution. So that is really tough. But I think figuring out, for us, we have a veteran team, figuring out what's the best way that we can do this and trust our players who have been here and build on what we've done. And we're not always going to get it right. I think that's the other thing. As coaches, we're not always going to get it right. We can do exactly what we ask the players to do. We learn from it. We move on from it. And we get better from it to the next day.
I remember having a conversation with a pro soccer player who was kind of amidst the transition from being an elite college player to the pro ranks. And we talked during her first training camp, and she talked about this idea that you kind of talked about a few moments ago. You're a student athlete. You've got a lot of different things going on. You're a student. You've got to go to class. There's all kinds of other stuff. Then you're a pro, and it's essentially your sole focus. Now, what was interesting about that conversation was that, my assumption going in is that when you have the opportunity to focus on something as a sole focus, it becomes easier. She articulated that it actually had become harder, that these other outlets were like forcing her away from, in her case, the soccer field. It was almost a forcing function for her to focus on other things and take her attention away from what was going on field. Talk about that for a minute. Like, what do you remember about kind of that phase as a player? And then are you able to see certain players now navigate that transition better than others?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, when I think back to when I was a player, it was a long, long time ago, right? So we didn't have the same distraction. We didn't have social media. We didn't have all of these things. We didn't have streaming shows that we were watching. There weren't podcasts, right? So we weren't as distracted with our time or not as efficient in our time. I think now you can kind of get caught up in binge watching a show or scrolling through social media or something like that. So it really was, you go to work, you get your treatment, you go to work, you stay after, you get your shots, you go home and you're probably, watching film, watching scout, trying to figure out ways to get better. But you're also living life, right? Like, I was in Indiana, so my family was around. So seeing my siblings and my cousins and my aunts and uncles and my parents and all of those things, I was fortunate to be able to do some of those things, but staying locked in, now there's a lot of distractions sometimes. And I think that you find that players sometimes just get caught up in time wasting away. But I do also think that now we have more information than ever. So players prioritizing health and wellness in a way that they never have. Yes, we talked about nutrition when I was a player, but there wasn't the same information. We weren't educated enough about nutrition, about prehab, rehab, recovery, sleep, all of these things, mental health, emotional health, the availability and options to have these services that can take care of the holistic you, because it is hard being a professional athlete. It's hard physically, it's hard mentally, it's hard emotionally. What do you do when you quote unquote get the yips? What do you do when you're struggling from the free throw line? What do you do when you can't knock down a shot? What do you do when life sometimes gets in the way and gets distracted? So I think how far we've come in terms of recognizing those things, educating about those things, and providing services in those areas for athletes has come a long way. And continuing to encourage our athletes to utilize those resources that we have to focus on your holistic self so that you can be the best player you can be, that you can be the best person that you can be, the best leader that you can be, and the best influence that you can be. Because now that we're seeing on every level, we want your little girls to be able to see our players, doing what they love. And I have 4 boys. So when my boys come here and they see our players before practice, doing their prehab, doing their stretching, doing their foam rolling in the weight room, getting shots up after practice, getting shots up in the weight room, refueling. When my kids see that example of what it takes to be elite at the things that you want to do, it gives them confidence. It gives them courage and to put themselves out there in those ways. And it helps them understand the work that it takes to be the best that you can be.
It sure takes a lot of work. I'm a huge believer in this idea of leading by example and modeling the behaviors that you want to see. And it's taken far too long for the general public to realize and see female athletes, and particularly, women's basketball, and to be able to, you've always been there, or you've been there for a long time, all of you. And you've been such great examples, so many, it's just been not as accessible. And one of my long gripes with kind of how this has all gone down the last handful of years is these people who say, well, nobody watches this, or nobody would show up. Well, of course, nobody's going to watch it when it's on ESPN 6 and it's at 9 in the morning on on a Tuesday, right? Like when you make it available and you show people what's there, no wonder why it's taken off. And people, the other thing I'm struck by is that people say that this is like a moment. I don't think it's a moment. The word I've been using is movement. I mean, there's countless people, yourself included, who have been a part of this slow brick by brick movement to get women's sports and women's basketball to where it is today. But I always felt like it was chicken or the egg. It's like if you put this product on TV at a time when people can watch it on a channel that people can find, it's going to be remarkable. And I don't know if you saw it, but one of the coolest things that I've seen, over the last few months as this groundswell has continued is a teacher, an elementary school teacher, posted something onto social media that a boy on her playground essentially was like, instead of pretending to be LeBron James shooting these ridiculous threes, he was pretending to be Caitlin Clark. And it was a boy pretending to be Caitlin Clark. And my girls talk about the players in the WNBA and have enjoyed watching the women's March Madness. I've heard you say that because you've got all boys and they're around the women's game, they're sometimes like surprised to see that men play basketball. Yes. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, that was my oldest. I remember I took him to his first Indiana Pacers game when he was 2 or 3 years old, and he hadn't been to one before, but he'd been to all of our Indiana Fever practices and games. And, he'd been traveling with me since he was about 6 months old, going to all these things. And I'll never forget, he looked at me He became a big George Hill fan at that game. And he looked at me and he was like, Mommy, boys play basketball too? And it was just the coolest thing because it really is what our kids see, what we expose them to. It matters. And I used to see men and dads and grandfathers and uncles taking little girls to Pacers games all the time and to Colts games when I was growing up and to men's basketball games. But I wasn't seeing dads or moms or aunts or uncles bringing their little boys to women's sporting events. And I was so happy that mine got to be associated with that. Mine do the same thing. They're like, I'm AT or I'm DB, or at that time it was Tamika Catchings. And they were proudly wearing and still proudly wearing their women's basketball jerseys. Just this year, my oldest son's, he's now 12 years old. His little friend group were texting about our game against Indiana, right? It's like, oh, Caitlin Clark this and Alyssa Thomas that. And it's so cool to see. But you're absolutely 100% right. When you put us in a place where people could find us, like it's human nature, right? We're kind of lazy by human nature. We want what's convenient. I'm not going to search through back in the old days, the back of the newspaper to search, like I'm going to read the front page and whatever catches my eye, I might go back into the back, right? Our players, we give them a 5-page scouting report. They're really only looking at page 1 or 2. So whatever we want them to see, it's got to be on page 1 or 2. When you have to search different networks, different streaming services, different everything, times that aren't convenient to find these games, no one's going to watch them. But in making it a priority to now put it in prime time, to put it singularly on networks and not whip around coverage where people can see it, I think that all of that has helped. And I am convinced that the movement started for the WNBA in the bubble. People weren't going out. They weren't doing things. It's tough sometimes in the summertime. They started watching the WNBA. Then they started seeing these women who are using their platform for the greater good outside of basketball. And they start seeing these women who are elite at what they do, the best in the world. And they're like, hey, this is actually really fun to watch. And it started to continue to build. And then you build off of the momentum of March Madness, the intersection of these young players who are better than ever, more talented than ever, more athletic than ever, who are engaged socially in a way that young people weren't before, who understand the impact of continuing to move the needle, but also understand that they're standing on the shoulders of those who came before them and are giving them their flowers. Now it's just continuing this movement on another level. And I'm just thankful to continue to be a part of this. I'm starting as a player in the 3rd year of the league when we were just wanting insurance all year long and collective bargaining to now charter flights to the celebrity status that these players have, to the access that fans have to watch these players. I'm incredibly grateful to still be a part of this and to see this growth. But I like you, like, where you been? We've been here. Where you been? Thank you.
That's kind of how I've long felt about all this. Yeah, I mean, and again, it's like this chain, right? It's like the Nancy Liebermans and the Stephanie Whites, and now it's the ATs and the Donna Bonners and the Caitlin Clarks and the Sabrina Ionescu's, right? And it's just going to continue. And I agree with you. I think the bubble and the confluence of NIL and the college game, I think, NIL, from my vantage point, it took some of the corporate and the networks and some of the sponsorship just kind of out of the hands of some of the headquarters, and it gave the players a chance to show what they could do. And we've had a tremendous groundswell since. It's remarkable. We talked around and a lot about parenting, and I'm curious, as a parent and as an elite coach, what's one thing that you've learned in parenting that you've been able to bring to coaching? And what's one thing in coaching that you've been able to bring to parenting?
I think first and foremost, the various levels that I've coached, one thing that I bring from coaching to parenting is, as parents, we don't want to allow our kids to fail anymore. We want them to, quote unquote, have the life we never had. And we don't want them to have the struggles that we had and all of those things, right? But none of us would be where we are without our struggles, without our failures, without our setbacks. We wouldn't have the resilience. We wouldn't have the work ethic and the work style. We wouldn't understand how to get back up every time that we get knocked down. And so I've learned to allow my children to fail, to help them navigate what it feels like to sit in it, to help them navigate what you have to do to get back up, to help them navigate difficult conversations. I'm not coming in and having difficult conversations for you. You've got to learn how to problem solve with your siblings. You got to learn how to problem solve with your peers. You've got to learn how to talk to adults in a way when there's a problem. I'll come in and have your back if things don't move in a positive
Sure.
direction. But we've got to teach them how to stand on their own 2 feet. I mean, I feel like our job as a parent is to prepare them to not need us, right? And oftentimes when I hear that my children or my parents are my best friends, like we're preparing them to need us, and I love my children and I am always going to be there for my children. But I also know that there's going to be a time for them to spread their wings and do their own thing. And I want them to have all the necessary skills to be able to position themselves for success. Much more. I want them to be successful much later in life than right now when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And I think you learn some of those skills through sport. Now, I think being a parent and how it's helped me be a better coach is, and this is part of age too, right? So before I was just very like, it's black and white. Everything is black and white. Like you're either doing this or you're doing that. You're not doing your job or you are. And very few things are black and white, right? There's so much gray. And learning from being a parent of giving grace, of seeing different perspectives, of being a little more flexible in my communication, being a little bit more flexible in not expectations and lowering standard, but how we get to the standard and knowing that each player, like each child, responds in a different way and continuing to try to be my best. And also understanding that, as a parent and as a coach, like I'm going to screw up. I'm going to do things that I'm going to regret. I'm going to do things I wish would have done differently. And to give myself grace for that, to give our players grace for that while still holding to the high standard. And the same thing for my children. We're going to have chores. We're going to have structure. We're going to have expectations. You're a part of a team. And we all have to do our part for this team to be successful, while at the same time loving on them and giving hugs and being there, and our players letting them know that, hey, I'm here as much or as little as you want to use me, but we understand that you're human beings as well as basketball players. And so that's given me an entirely new perspective from my days of being a coach when I was not a parent.
Whether it's coaching or parenting, how do you find the right balance between pushing someone enough, but not pushing them too much?
That's a tough question. As a coach and as a parent, I really try to be much more observant with body language than I probably ever was. I want to push and I want to hold to a standard, but I've got to read the body language. I got to read the room, right? If the response is shrug shoulders and dropped head, then I'm not getting the response that I want. I want to build confidence. I want them standing tall, right? So maybe my communication style needs to change. Maybe getting in the gym or watching film or like a little extra one-on-one time is going to be there. Same thing as a parent. I have 4 children in a blended family, all receive information very differently, all self-motivated at various levels. So the ones I need to push, the ones I need to keep my thumb on versus the ones I can give a little bit more freedom to is important. But also by being clear about what the expectations are for each of them. There are certain non-negotiables and there are certain things that are negotiable. I want them to feel comfortable continuing to come to me and have these negotiable conversations, or pushing the envelope, thinking outside the box, challenging social norms. I want all of those things. I want my children, just like I want our players, to be aware and fans of critical thinking. Like, don't just do it because that's what I say. Like, let's challenge one another. Let's challenge one another to grow and to be better and to be flexible. And I think that's the biggest area I've grown. I was very fixed mindset early in my career as a player, as a coach, as a human being, and learning to be a little bit more flexible and have a little bit more of a growth mindset. And I hope that for some of our players and some of my children, the same way, that I can, because of my experience, help influence them in that way of understanding that a growth mindset is also very advantageous in what we do.
Was there one or two things in particular that helped you go from that fixed to growth mindset, aside from experience? Because I'm sure experience may have been a part of it.
Parenting, becoming a parent. You were probably the same way. I think every parent's terrified when you first get your child and you're like, I don't know what to do. I've been preparing for this, but I don't really know. You can't prepare for what you don't know, right? There's no substitute for experience. But softening the edges when you are loving someone more than you ever thought that you possibly could, when you take so much pride and showing them new experiences and having new experiences with them, when you're celebrating those milestones. And I think as a coach, oftentimes, especially as a young coach before parenting, we're so focused on the end goal that we forget to celebrate the milestones along the way. We forget to celebrate the progress. We forget to celebrate the human being and all of the other core characteristics of what make this player, this person, this human being elite. It's not just that they can put the ball in the hole. And so I think parenting gave me an entirely new perspective. And then I wanted to grow and learn in those areas. And so then education, reading books and watching podcasts and talking to life coaches as well as sport coaches and mental health coaches and helping myself grow first so that I could lead by example.
I was smiling when you talked about, kind of, again, these correlations between coaching and parenting. I recently had a conversation with new Duke football head coach Manny Diaz. And I asked, so Manny's, if you're not familiar with Manny's story, he's an assistant coach for many years. He was a head coach at Miami. He went back to the defensive coordinator role at Penn State, where he had tremendous success. And now he's the head coach at Duke. And I asked him about really the experience. And you've had some of this too, going from head coaching roles to assistant coaching roles to head coaching roles. And I said, what's the biggest difference between the head coaching role and the first time you're a head coach and then the second time you're a head coach? And he said, Andrew, you have kids, right? And I said, yes. He said, remember, before you had your first kid, you're like, I watched my parents do this for years. I have spent all these years watching what it's going to take to be a parent. Then you go to the hospital, then you come home with this little baby and you have no clue.
Yep.
And he said, that's like what it's like going to be a head coach for the first time, at least for me. He said, I was like, oh, how hard could this be? 18, 19, 20 years as an assistant, high school, college. Well, it was like bringing a baby home for the first time. And then the second go around, he felt like it was much more easy to get acclimated, although not easy, in entirety. Do you agree? You're smiling.
I do. I agree. Again, I had a lot of great mentors who prepared me to be a head coach. But I use the analogy, as a player, you're flying at 10,000 feet, right? As an assistant coach, you're flying at 30,000 feet. And as a head coach, you're flying at like 80,000 feet, right? There's so many different things that you're navigating. It's so very little. You mentioned it about X's and O's, and you're managing and you're trying to come up with lineups. And this is just at the pro level. The college level, it's like 150,000 feet, maybe even 200 now with NIL, right? So there's all of these different things. And the first time it can be overwhelming. We can get very tunnel vision on one or two and not really manage them all. And you also, I think the first time as a head coach, you want to prove that you know what you're doing too. So you might not delegate as much as you need to and should for you to be your best and for your team to be their best. And the second time, it's like, okay, I've got a little bit more of a true north and an understanding of what this is going to be like. I also am using this second time around, especially as an opportunity to prepare my assistant coaches to be head coaches. Lynn Dunn was a mentor of mine. She single-handedly prepared me to be a head coach in a way no other head coach that I worked for did. It's part of our job, especially in this league. When you've got assistant coaches who want to be head coaches, part of our job is, yes, we need them to play the role that we need, certainly, but also helping them grow and expand so that they're going to be ready when their time has come. So I look at it more of a continued holistic perspective here. And, I allow my assistant coaches to do a lot. They take great ownership and great pride in that. They are very good at what they do. And I cannot wait until they go on to be head coaches.
So well said, Coach. I mean, I could sit here and ask you questions for the next 5 hours, but I know you have places to be. The last question, as we wrap up our conversation, we've talked a lot, in particular over the last few minutes, about the idea of a growth mindset. So my question to you is, what do you believe your biggest area for growth is as a coach?
I think continuing to be flexible, whether it's game plan, coming in and, okay, this is what we wanted to do. Like, we got to change this quickly. I think helping our players continuing to learn how to be flexible. So leading by example in that. Just yesterday, we had ideal of what we wanted to do from a scheduling standpoint. Our flight was delayed multiple times, right? So we had to make adjustments. We have to be smart. We have to think the long game. Continuing to be a lifelong learner with X's and O's and trying to be on the forefront of the way the game is changing. Not being so fixed on, this is what we've done. This has been successful. Okay, well, maybe it's been successful in 4 games in the regular season, but in a series in the postseason, it's not, right? Teams are too good. Players are too good. So continuing to challenge the norm and think outside the box and be ahead of the curve, challenge our staff to do that as well, and challenge our players to be flexible and receptive enough. Maybe we go out and we do something that we haven't practiced yet. And how do we challenge them to be able to do those things? And I think at the end of the day, for me to continue to grow in a way that not just grows our game in the basketball court, but grow our sport in general and be more available from that perspective. And whether that's using media and being available to the media, being available to the community, being available at the Final Four to do WBCA things, like all of these things to continue to encourage, empower, and influence this younger generation of coaches who is going to be the next wave, just like this younger generation of players, and encourage them and empower them to be their best selves and to continue to be lifelong learners.
Very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. And there is no question, as I like to say every week on this show, you are a tarp puller, a certified tarp puller, a member of the Everybody Pulls the Tarp family forever. Coach Stephanie White, congratulations on all the success. I've had so much fun following your career, studying your career, and talking with you today about some of the secrets behind your success. And it's just very, very powerful and striking to me, not, despite all the success that you've had, how focused you are still on growing individually, personally, professionally, and most importantly, the focus that you have on lifting up all the people around you and continuing to spark this wonderful movement that we're seeing that you've been a part of for so long. So thank you for spending a few minutes with me this week. And I really appreciate all the lessons that you've shared here today.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Sandy, for having me.
All right, everyone. If you loved this episode, you might also enjoy my interview with two-time World Series champion Ben Zobrist. In 2000, Ben graduated high school and thought his baseball career was over. He wasn't drafted in high school and didn't have plans to play baseball in college. But then he used $50 of his birthday money to pay for a nearby college tryout. It was there that Ben caught the attention of a coach who offered him a scholarship, and the rest is history. Ben went on to become a 3-time Major League Baseball All-Star and a 2-time World Series champion. You can find my conversation with Ben right here on Everybody Pulls the Tarp in your favorite podcast app. It's filled with inspiration and powerful lessons that you don't want to miss. Check it out and let me know what you think. Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.